That's if you're in a noisy place, that's actually the super easy way to do it. But then you forget to press the space bar, and you know.
But is any moment going up 111? I said it would.
Yep. Does anybody have any plants that they can hold up to their camera and show us in arm's reach?
No, they're all down the greenhouse.
my growing space is right here next to me in my windowsill, so, and my window ledge outside. So
well, you can share things then, John.
I can. Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I can grab something and show something to people. Sure. Let's see. I can show you a plant I got from Russell. I can show you a lot of plants I got from Russell, actually. But I won't. I'll just show you one that I really like, which is this is one I got this from Russell years ago. It's a gladiphilum.
Yeah.
And it's ugly. I mean, it's a super ugly plant. You know, gladiphilums aren't really that attractive, but you know, it's got a big seed pod on there, or a big fruit on there though. But and it grows pretty slowly. But what I love about it is it's Gladiphilum depressum, and he calls it AF, which is affinity to fragrans. I guess that's a type of Gladiphilum depressum. But what it means is that the flower smells really good. It's like the nicest perfume you've ever smelled. Like, you know, everybody says their flowers smell good. This is like way better. And you smell it, and it's so peaceful and beautiful. And it flowers sometimes each rosette will flower twice in 1 year. So, but they almost all of them flower once, even the little tiny ones. So it's an amazingly cool plant. And of course, for all the British people, you'll notice my fancy pot, and you can make fun of me privately about my fancy American pot, you know. But I got my
terracotta pot or a plastic pot.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's different people do different things here. Like, you know, if you're a botanical horticultural type grower, then you grow in plastic pots, and you have a giant greenhouse.
Like the fancy pots. I suppose it shows the plants off. I'm a bit old fashioned.
Yeah. The nice thing is, though, they do come in a big variety of pots, a big variety of sizes, so you can really find a pot that's just the right size for your root system, and they can get really happy in them. And of course, if you use terracotta, you can have it wick the water out too. Which is also nice. Okay, well, Ivor and Peter and Brian, you guys keep everybody entertained. I'm going to work on. I've got a little thing to work on.
Okay, well, I'll tell a little bit about my Mesemb talk that I'm going to be doing on January 30th. So I'm the curator at the Ruth Bancroft Garden in Walnut Creek, California, and we grow quite a few mesembs out in the ground here. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about at my webinar. It is a paid webinar, and if you go to the Ruth Bancroft Garden website, you can find out about it and how to sign up for it. But I am featuring over 100 different mesembs in about, I think, 25 or 30 different genera. And these are all things that we have grown outdoors here at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. Maybe a few indoor ones, but there are lots of ones like lithops that don't want winter rain that we cannot grow outdoors. So we especially focus on the western ones, the ones from western South Africa that get winter rainfall and habitat that will tolerate our wet winters. So things like Chirodopsis and Cephalophyllum we have a lot of here. But there are also ones that are mainly summer rainfall plants, but that grow in the interior of South Africa where it's very erratic rain. And we can grow those outdoors here too if we give them extremely good drainage. But they're getting a lot of rain at a time of year when they don't really want it. And so if you don't have that excellent drainage, they just won't make it. But things like Rabia and Eloanopsis are in that category from the central interior part of South Africa.
There's been a request. Can the link for that talk be advertised?
I don't know how to do that, but if
you can just open the chat and paste it in the chat.
Ruth Bancroft Garden, then you will be able to find it easily.
Yeah, it's on their events page.
I'll get John to send it across to us, and we will we'll put it up.
Thank you. Do you know what? It's 205 now. Still going up. 208.
If Cameron wants to keep an eye on the Manchester branch website, we'll post it up there, the link for Brian's talk.
Yeah, it will be at 10 a.m. our time. So are you 8 hours later? That'll be 6 p.m. your time.
Oh, that's a very reasonable time. I'll accept that.
That'll be good.
So yes, Brian, I am interested.
Sound
cold.
Oh, should have put it on before. I don't want to leave. Can I minimise it for a minute? How do I do that? I just want to see the normal screen.
Oh, we've exited again.
Oh, so what do I do? I'll start.
Well, you know, with all the worrisome things that have been going on around the globe in 2020, we're certainly hoping for better in 2021. But one good thing that came out of all this is the advent of meetings via Zoom. So now we can hear from speakers in distant parts of the world without having to fly them in. And it's really opened up a lot of new possibilities for us. And so this is something we can continue to take advantage of going into the future. And it will enable a lot more communication between people in different parts of the world. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And we've got 278.
Totally agree, Brian.
Yes, I agree too. So very much.
It used to be that people in remote places, like let's say the North Dakota Cactus and Succulent Society, would have a very hard time getting speakers because it was very much off the beaten path and nobody wanted to go there just for one talk. But now they can have a speaker from anywhere in the world, and that's really a wonderful thing.
One of the advantages of COVID, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
One of the only things, it is good. And these will carry on, I know. Our local branch is trying to do them.
Very well said. Well said.
We noticed in our branch when we first started doing meetings by Zoom that two people who've not been able to, because of their physical health, to get to branch meetings over a 2 or 3 year period were able to join us for the first time. So even that, it's been good to get people who are housebound as well into meeting rooms. So it's extended the scope of the number of people that we're able to get, as well as across the world, but also across health barriers as well.
Yep. Well, here in San Francisco, our membership extends to other parts of the Bay Area, where there are bridges to cross and commuter traffic to face if you're going to make it to a meeting. And that can be very difficult for some people. So being able to do it by Zoom from your home is a wonderful thing for them too.
There's probably tolls too, right? Bridge tolls.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Welcome, Jorge.
Hi, John.
So for all the Bay Area people, Jorge is I don't know if your actual official title has changed, but he's a prime organizer of the Monterey Society here, in kind of like about 2 hours from San Francisco, and is a really interesting and knowledgeable guy when you get to know him. I was very impressed once I got to know him, and definitely should, if you're in the Bay Area, you'll notice him at the shows and sales and everything when they start up again. And Jorge, are you having another meeting soon for your
board meeting tomorrow? Just sharing gardens this month. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great.
I'm trying to put the links to some of these bigger talks, like with the BCSS and your talks in our newsletter.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're waiting for Russell to come, but Russell, if you are here, speak up so we know that you're here. He did.
I'm here. Can you see me? Hello.
Hi,
No,
Russell.
I can't see you, but we'll find you and I'll add you in here. Great.
Oh, I'm under a Will Puckett. Will Puckett. Look for Will Puckett.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. You can change your name, Russell, if you click in the top right. If you you're on the phone, it's probably too hard. Maybe not it won't be easy. But if you're
an iPad, so and someone else is doing it, so
okay.
Do you want to change the name so people can find me?
On the computer, you do it by touching your own video square and then going to the little ... symbol, and then there's a thing for rename. I don't know how it works on an iPad. If somebody else does, you could maybe speak up and tell us.
I've beaten him to it.
I think Will's probably figuring it out.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
He did.
How's it going?
Ivor did it
Will?
to you. He can change your name for you, so it's already
done. Actually, we can just move on from there.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna. Oh, I don't need to make you co-host because you're not sharing a screen. So, but I'm gonna make you co-host just in case if we need to mute all or something, then you'll be able to unmute yourself, which we will at the beginning. We'll mute everybody. So, yeah, prepare to unmute yourself when that comes around. And Ivor, do you wanna launch the talk? I can share my screen while you do that. And
if you wish, yeah, we can. If we're ready now, it's just gone 7, hasn't it? With 3 minutes past 7, so we can kick off if you want. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna hit.
Эта конференция записывается.
I'm gonna hit record.
Yeah.
And share my screen so I can get this visual up here.
Yeah. Can we? Are we going to mute everybody else? I think it's easier if we can. If you mute everybody.
I can't do that if I'm sharing, right? Yep. Let me do it. Hold on just a second.
Then we can. Once everybody's muted.
So for the co-host, Ivor, you included, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, once everybody's muted, there's a lot less background noise. It makes it a bit easier, doesn't it? So welcome, everybody. We've now got 388 here, haven't we? From several corners of the globe. We've got people from Britain, Europe, America, and the Far East, by the look of it, including Derbyshire and Essex. So big welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We've got a couple of announcements first. I don't know if John wants to share screen at this point. We can just have a look at the announcements. Are you going to talk to these, John, or do you want me to? Okay. So the first is Mesemb Study Group. Just a general announcement. If anybody's not a member of the Mesemb Study Group and they'd like to join the Mesemb Study Group, it's quite easy to join. The quarterly bulletin's £12 sent out through the post. And you can, if you want prior knowledge and prior warning of when the next meeting's going to be in this series, we're going to hold one every quarter, hopefully from now on. So 4 times a year, there should be one. You can join the MSG MailChimp list, and you will be automatically sent an email before the meeting giving you details of how to join it. You can also find that from the Mesemb Study Group page as well. Anybody wants to know what's going on in the BCSS in England, the BCSS website's there up in front of everybody. At the moment, the BCSS is hosting a Zoom meeting at 7:30 p.m. British time, which is going to be most Tuesday nights. It starts up again about the middle of January, although the next one will be on a Friday because it's a joint meeting with the German Society. So they're well worth watching if you don't already know about them. I think there's a lot of faces I recognise here. I see at the BCSS ones. And the Manchester branch next meeting is going to be the 9th of April at 7:30. And one of our members in the audience tonight, Rob Stevenson, will be talking to us about Turbinicarpus and related genera. So I think that, and the San Francisco Succulent Society, if you wish to join that as well, if you're from America, the joining details are there. Their online meetings will be the 3rd Tuesday of each month, 7 p.m. California time. And the next event is Rob Webb, who's the president of the International Sansevierias Society, who's going to be talking about Sansevierias. I've just been reminded through the chat as well that the MSG seed distributors with us in the audience. You can find more details about that through the MSG Facebook page if you're a member of the MSG as well. So I think that's really all the introductory bits and pieces we wanted to get out of the way. I see both people who are going to speak tonight, Terry and Russell, are now with us. Can I just say to Russell, please, you've got your camera in portrait mode. Is it possible to change it to landscape mode because it fits the screen for most people better?
Is that us or them?
Sorry? No. So with that, I think it's over to John to introduce Russell, and we can then kick off. John, you're muted. John, you're muted.
Strange, I was pushing my spacebar, but it wasn't unmuting me. So I must have clicked off the screen. So just a reminder also to Russell's camera person to make sure that you've unmuted yourself, because we did mute everyone else or everyone in the audience. What I can say about Russell is that I first met him at one of the first meetings of the San Francisco Society that I went to, and he gave a wonderful presentation. And I think he's given either 1 or 2 since then. But as I looked at some of the old newsletters from our society, he's given maybe dozens over the years. He used to be a board member and the newsletter editor of the San Francisco Society before he went on to be the editor of the Cactus and Succulent journal, the CSSA's journal. And yeah, he's a great grower. I know that everybody here in the Bay Area probably has a lot of his plants. And so now we get to see where the magic happens. And with that, I'll just go ahead and pass it to him.
Am I on? Welcome,
yes,
everyone. Can you hear me? Awesome.
Yes.
So we're in my greenhouse in Oakland, California, and it's a little bit rainy outside and a little cool, but I thought it'd be fun for some of you who are hunkered down for the winter to see what growing is like in California. Let's take a look at the building for a second. This is a greenhouse that I designed. It's the 3rd one that I've built. And I built it based on the design of Stephen Hammer's greenhouses in Southern California. So the frame is actually a very angle brackets, and these poles are used in galvanized fencing construction. And then with the same galvanized fencing, of the walls are just looks like they're just shade cloth, and the only real that makes this a greenhouse is that there's a plastic roof. So that we are in a winter rainfall.
Oh.
I think I dropped off there for a second. So, so we're in winter rainfall about 2 or 3 in the winter than most of the plant would want, and where it's quite a bit drier than here. So even though our weather is kind of ideally suited in terms of latitude and temperature, we get too much rain, so I keep the rain off. Are we doing okay?
You had a comment saying you're weaving in and out.
Like I'm drunk, or like so let's the stuff that I grow is winter rainfall, South African, some things from the Canary Islands, and then a smattering of cacti. We won't look at those because this is a mesem. But because I've been to South Africa a bunch of times, I've become obsessed with small bulbs and geophytic daisies. You might have noticed I was pollinating my Athonas. Let's come in and take a look at these for a second. Athonas are really cool pachycol or geophytic daisies, and you can see this one has a really spectacular stem, and this is actually a hybrid. Caculioides being a very small little nub of a plant. Check that out. And you can see this is in full flower right now. I've got an actually quite old one, and what's interesting about these is that in the cram them all together on this bench, but this time of year is out. I have to which is very irritating. But
are you taking questions, Hugo? Somebody wants to know if you do visits.
So let's hold off on questions, and we'll do questions. One leaf with these blue leaves, sometimes a little serrated edge. But this time of year, it's very hard to see the stem. And so they're really awesome to have if you like really cool and weird in the summer when it's leafless. A lot of my leafless plants in the summer just look like empty pots. So I have about a collection that in the summertime looks very strange because half the plants look dead. Let's come around here, and I think a lot of mesem talks focus on conophytum and lithops. They're the smallest, kind of most popular mesems, and there's probably a good reason for that. I mean, they're really cool plants, but they're really suited to pot culture. They like being in small little crevices, shallow soil. They're pre-adapted as a result. Growing mesem.
There you go.
Cool. We're having some technical difficulties, so this is the modern age. We're having fun. So I was saying that you know, when you get started with mesems, you might believe that all mesems can be grown in a pot like this lithops, and so you'll by plants and order some seeds and grow. And in time, plants like Chirodopsis, mesembs, because the vast majority of mesembs, of like 16 or 1800 species, most of them are large shrubs. And those things really hate life in a pot. And then there are a lot of medium-sized plants. And by medium-sized, I mean they get like 1.5 feet across in nature. They're big plants. And Chirodopsis is one of those things. If you get some Chirodopsis seed, you can get them off of a cool old plant like this, and for years you'll wonder why it looks so terrible. This thing I sowed in 2005, so it's 15 years old now, and for a long time it did not have these cool fat leaves, and that's the reason I wanted to grow this plant. This is Chirodopsis crassa. It's well named. Crassa means fat or thick or succulent, and in Spanish, plantas crassas are succulent plants. And now, 15 years in, it looks pretty decent. But what I finally realized after seeing these plants in nature is that they don't want to be in a 3-inch pot. They don't even want to be in a 4-inch pot. Some of these things are probably not happy in a gallon pot, but now I've got them mostly in gallon pots, and they're starting to look pretty cool. They're starting to look kind of natural. I was really surprised when I first saw Chirodopsis aspera in nature. Let's pull one out. These are in 4-inch pots. I've got some in larger pots here. Well, this is Chirodopsis umdalcensis, which is basically a type of aspera. It's sort of like Chirodopsis aspera with bigger teeth. And you can see it's called aspera because it has this asperus or sandpaper-like texture. There's these little white hairs and stuff, and also these teeth, really cool teeth at the tips. But it also has this woody, shrubby, branchy structure. And these can be huge plants in nature. A real Chirodopsis aspera, which you can see around Steinkopf, can be 2 feet across. They're spectacular plants. So as I've learned more about these things, I've been putting them in bigger and bigger pots. And this goes back to why lithops and conophytums are really popular. They're small, so you can have a lot more of them in a pretty small area. So, but why would you grow Chirodopsis? I'll give you 2 reasons. One, they're super beautiful, and obviously we're growing these things because they're cool to look at. But the other is that from seed, they're probably the easiest of all the mesembs. Chirodopsis seed germinated 100%, usually in 3 days. And so if you get Chirodopsis seed and sow them, you are guaranteed to have germination and success. And so that's really exciting. And it's the reason why I've grown almost every species, and why at any given time I've had 80 or more of any of the species. And so it's quite likely that if you live in the Bay Area and you have a Chirodopsis, it may have come from me because, well, I have to get rid of the plant somehow. And so out they go. Now, not all Chirodopsis are big plants. We have these sort of big charismatic ones, and in Namaqualand, they'll cover hillsides, big blue dots all over the hill. There are also small ones. And so if you're the type of person who likes a conophytum and a small leafed plant, then you can have something like Chirodopsis minima, where the individual heads are really quite small. And you won't be able to see this in the video, but the little fissure in each head is actually a little comb of white teeth. They're very bizarre. So I love this plant. I think it's really cool. And there are a few other small species. This is a one that Stephen Hammer directed me to. He claims it's undescribed. I trust him. It's from a place called Rudekloof. It's really next to a road. It's not hard to get to. But the problem with things like Chirodopsis and mesembs in general is that there are many of them, and they're sometimes hard to tell apart. There's been a lot of lumping of species, and so some things which are obviously quite distinct are all called the same thing, and then you have plants that have gone overlooked. One of my favorite Chirodopsis actually is this pointy-leaved one, and this one's looking quite ratty at the moment. Let's see if we can find a nicer one. I have an admission. I kill plants all the time. All the time. I am a plant killer. I think it's in my nature. I think we all are. And my cameraman today said years ago, you're not growing out as a gardener if you're not killing plants. And so every time a plant dies, I just remind myself that I'm growing as a gardener. But one of the things that I have taken to is I've been allowing plants to slowly die just to see what happens. And mesembs die in a really beautiful way. This is an Elenfeltia excavata. Oh, it's really very unhappy. And you're wondering why I'm showing you this. Let me show an even cooler dead plant. Hold on. I have these lapidarias, these seedlings here, and this one here has died. But look how beautiful it is in death. And one of the interesting things is you see dead mesembs in nature all the time, and they wrinkle in exactly this way. And if you ever go to an herbarium and look at mesembs on an herbarium sheet, they look just like this. And so I like to keep plants alive, but you know, don't be afraid of death. Some mesembs turn beautiful colors. Always something alive nearby that will entertain. So if you can't get excited about the dead ones, stay excited about the thousands of other live ones you have, right? Perfect, beautiful thing right now. And maybe a bit plain. One of the problems about doing this in midwinter is all the plants are green and lush, and when things are green and lush, they're not exactly eye-catching. This plant turns hot pink in the spring as it goes dormant. And so it's a lovely plant, and there's actually 5 seedlings in this pot. They're only, can you believe this? No, this can't be true. This says it was sowed February 2019. This is coming up on 2 years old. So super satisfying. If you want to grow a fast-growing mesemb, get yourself some Chirodopsis. You can have a pot like this in less than 2 years. Hard to believe. So springtime for this group of plants is all about color, and then in the summer they sheath over. A lot of them kind of look dead and sheathed over. Let's talk about some more Chirodopsis. This is a very strange and undescribed species that looks kind of grassy. It grows next to a stream in a pretty wet area. I was there looking for something else, actually. No, I was there looking for this. I went one year to photograph all the Chirodopsis I could find in flower. But it's also strange to find that there are mesembs that want to be wet all the time. And this thing really never wants to dry out, and it can look quite ratty if it does. So if you become obsessed with mesembs, you'll find yourself even kind of ugly mesembs, just because they're rare and weird. And that's okay. What else do we have here? So, as we know, mesembs, why are they called mesembs? I guess the original family name referred to the plants being, don't do that, sorry, midday flowers. And midday does not mean noon. We're not going to see these flowers open until quite late in the afternoon, and probably not today at all because it's really cloudy. Mesemb flowers close up at night, and we can see this here. This is Chirodopsis speciosa, and most Chirodopsis have yellow flowers. There's a few species that have beautiful purple or red flowers, and speciosa can be a wide variety of colors. But years ago, I collected a capsule off of one of Stephen Hammer's plants because the plant had these beautiful fuchsia flowers. And this is one of the plants I got from that batch of seed. And you can see that it will, but we're not going to see it today. And then I have another, possibly from the same seed batch, but possibly from another where the flowers are purple. One of the, it's too much on it because it is open, but that's okay. I don't know how many of y'all grow big mesems. I mostly grow small ones, but I just have always been attracted to the sort of sculptural qualities of Chirodopsis. It's also sort of weird when you own a plant like this. This is Chirodopsis robusta, and then you go in nature and you see that this is probably the most common Chirodopsis in nature. When you go west of Steinkopf, these are absolutely everywhere. They fill valleys. There are thousands and thousands of them everywhere you look. And so to have one or two at home suddenly seems so sad or weird. Like there are thousands of them in nature, and I grow rare plants, but this isn't a rare plant at all. But it's so sculptural and beautiful that it's nice to be able to just go see it every day and not have to make a trek to South Africa. It's really nice to see it in nature too. So let's take a look at it. So there are a few things that look like splitting or fewer, depending on who's counting. Some people like to lump them back into each other. No matter, you can call them anything you want. There's no such thing as an invalid name if it was validly published. So as an example, if you think that, where's my Odontophorus? I must have one or two here somewhere. If you think Odontophorus is a Chirodopsis, you can call it that. And when someone finally sinks it into Chirodopsis, you can still call it Odontophorus. Here's an Odontophorus. And you can see structurally the leaves are sort of similar to a Chirodopsis. They tend to be toothy and they have a different texture and they have these long internodes. But by some accounts, this is a Chirodopsis. I don't trust those accounts, but that's okay. People can believe anything they want about these. It really doesn't matter. This is the coolest Odontophorus, and this one's called Odontophorus nanus, and the leaf shape is really beautiful. They have these interesting teeth. This one's in bud. You can see that the flowers are coming out, and one of the interesting things about the flower buds on this is that they're really quite hairy. I don't know if you can see that at all, but they're hairy flower buds. And you might be wondering what this thing is next to it. This is a seed capsule. So once the flowers have been pollinated, and I do go around and pollinate all my flowers on the theory that a sexually gratified plant is a happy plant, that it actually wants to make flowers, that some people have a perverse notion that, thank you, that a plant is wasting energy if it makes the fruit and seed. Some very strange people go around the collection cutting the flowers off of their plants so that the plants don't become starved of energy. But in fact, that's a terrible idea because plants are supposed to reproduce. You can't get seed unless you pollinate these flowers. And sometimes if you cut the flower off of a plant, being unsatisfied, it will try to produce another flower. So you can actually kill your plants by doing that. What you should do is allow it to go through its entire process, including making sure that it makes seed, even if you're not going to use them. And the nice thing about mesems is that these capsules will stay on the plant for literally years and will retain seeds for a long time as well. So at some point, I'll take these off and sell the seed, probably to Mesa Garden, so that they can get out into the world. Or I might decide to grow another batch of these myself. The other nice thing about making sure that your mesems are pollinated is that you'll get volunteer seedlings coming up because the seeds will splash out when you water. So I water from overhead, the capsules open, the seeds splash out, and I get quite a lot of volunteer seedlings. I know this is a mesem talk, but let's take a brief second. Come over here and we'll take a look at some bulbinis. Bulbini, these things are, let's take a look at this one. And so all this dies back in the summer, but they're really beautiful little plants. And some of them are quite choice. This one's called Bulbini alveolatus, one of Stephen Hammer's descriptions. We have a very coveted plant called Bulbini lolita. And what we can see here is it's a very tiny little rosette, but look at these flower stalks. They have a little squiggle at the bottom, and they really kind of boing around. I don't know what the purpose of the squiggle is, but that's very cool. I've been pollinating these flowers, so we're getting some capsules forming here. And each of these will have 12 to 20 seeds in it. And because these are not widely cultivated yet, I've been working very, very hard on getting seed out into the world. Most bulbinis are large, and there's quite a few shrubby ones that are used in gardens here in California. This one is somewhere in between. This is Bulbini primosa, and you can see it's coming into flower. Actually, this one did something interesting this year. The flower is becoming crested, so the inflorescence is getting crested here, which I think is quite cool. And it's such a strange thing that something so big and succulent will completely die back to the ground every year. These are empty pots, look like empty pots in the summertime. Point out that this is Tylochone nultii, volunteer seedlings in this pot. So I think this must have been near my Tylochones a couple of years ago, and now I have volunteers in there, which was a big surprise to me because Tylochones are not particularly easy to grow from seed, and this species is pretty rare in cultivation, and yet I have it coming up in my greenhouse. So you probably are doing something right if the plants you like to grow spontaneously reproduce in your collection. So I feel like I've hit my stride as a gardener here. Let's take a look at one more Bulbini. I could talk about all of them because they're really quite cool, but I think that people who are into these sort of things will appreciate, they would not appreciate me knocking over my seedlings, but this is Bulbini brainsii. It grows from one place, one small little area, and it's extremely thick and soft, and it's quite hard to grow. But I got about 27 seedlings a couple years ago. These are 2 years old this month. Well, last month, because these were sown December 2018. You can see they're already flowering size. I had 27 seedlings last January. Half of them died spontaneously. And my theory is that this is a good thing because the ones that died were weak and the ones that are alive are a little bit stronger. My goal is to create a race of these things that loves life in Oakland because, you know, it's disheartening to coddle weak plants, and it's nice to think that maybe someday this will be an easy to grow plant here, but maybe that's just a fantasy. I'm going to make a lot of seed and make sure that more people have this, and so hopefully by this time next year I'll have 100 seedlings of this thing. That's my goal. Let's see. We passed all the lithops, and I'm not going to tell you a single thing about lithops because it's summertime, it's wintertime, and they're asleep. I'm not watering them anymore. It was a very weird year for lithops. We had a lot of smoke here from nearby fires. I think it affected the flowering of a lot of things. A lot of my geophytes are really happy this year. Lithops were strange. They flowered over a really long period of time. A lot of the flowers were inverted. I got double flowers. A lot of the flowers just never opened. It was a terrible year for flowering of lithops, but the plants look pretty good. Instead, I'm going to show you things that that people don't normally talk about. Let's talk about Phylobolus. So there are a couple of primitive mesem genera that are actually really cool. And Phylobolus is one of the few mesems that people who are into caudex plants will grow. And you can see here that this actually has a woody tuber that these leaves are growing out of. These leaves are completely deciduous in the summer. This plant loses all of its leaves, and it comes back every year from a woody tuber. And if we look at the flowers on some of these things, I watered the other day and some of the flowers are wet. I apologize. But come in here and let's take a look at these. Phylobolus have these flowers that are quite a bit unlike other mesem flowers in that you can't see the sexual parts of them at all. You can't see the stamens and pistils and all the stuff that you would normally make mesem flowers easy to pollinate. And so if you were to just kind of brush this flower with a paintbrush, it wouldn't pollinate the flower at all. It took me a while to figure out, I had to dissect one of these flowers to figure out how to pollinate it. But here's what I do. I take a dry paintbrush, which this is not, and I insert it deep into the flower, as far down as I can go. And then I pull it out, and what you'll see is that actually some pollen on the tip of this paintbrush. And then I go to another flower on a nearby plant, the same species if I want to generate more of the same, or I can make a hybrid. So in this case, I'm finding the same species, and I'm gonna just reinsert this paintbrush into this flower. Now you know how to pollinate a Phylobolus or a Staumanthus. The plants, this one's pretty old now. My friend Carl sowed the seed. I did the first transplant of these about 15 years ago. And in nature, they do this funny thing where the stems will sprawl out on the ground. And here's last year's seed capsules. You can see I actually pollinated these, and they're good fruit. And then you can see the woody caudex that the leaves are growing out of. They're really quite satisfying if you like the dramatic change from one season to the next. And I'm going to show you where's my favorite one? Ah, there it is. I showed you that weird grassy looking Chirodopsis that I said likes to be wet. Well, it was growing with this beautiful Phylobolus that's very blue. And this Phylobolus pearsonii. I don't know, see the texture of the leaf, remarkable sort of texture. It doesn't rub, it does rub off. See, now I've never touched these leaves quite like this, and you can see that that actually rubs off that whitish coating. How interesting. So Phylobolus, really cool plants. There are many, many of them. They can have absolutely bizarre flower colors. Very few appear to be cultivated, and I have way too many, as one should, right? Let's take a brief moment and answer any questions. Maybe.
Why don't we run inside for question and answer so we've got a little bit better like video data stream? You want to do that? We'll just pause for 15 seconds, go to the living room.
Oh no, let's keep staying in here because I don't want to go back and forth. Okay. No. So we keep the problem.
Well, like everybody's muted. I mean,
no, there's chat questions. Did anybody? Oh. If you've got your questions in the little chat on the side, we can take a couple of questions, but we won't probably do video questions.
Russell?
Okay. Yes.
Oh, I was just going to read you the question, but if your camera.
Oh, that's okay. We can see. We can see it. I'll go ahead and have Will do it. But thank you. So someone asked what kind of medium. I hesitate to talk too much about that because the answer is the same every time you ask that question. The medium that you use is the one that's best for your growing conditions, your watering style and stuff like that. I will say that I use about 1/3 standard potting soil, This potting soils we have in California are mostly decomposed wood. A little bit of coconut coir, although the quality of that product is very variable and I don't trust it to be good for my plants most of the time. I use a lot of horticultural pumice and perlite. Perlite's my favorite soil amendment because it's very inexpensive and lightweight. And yeah, so that's about, and then all of my plants are top dressed with decomposed granite. And I'll say something about top dressing because it's actually kind of an interesting subject. A lot of people imagine that top dressing exists primarily for aesthetic purposes. And so by top dressing, I'm talking about this gravel here. And there's just about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch layer of gravel on top of this soil. And it does look nice. It gives a really nice look to the collection, but it's got a horticultural purpose. And its purpose is to, well, one is it keeps the lighter weight soil materials from floating up and washing out of the pot, but it also forms a sharp little connection between the rock and the soil, which somehow serves to funnel the water into the soil, especially if your soils are dry, which we let our soils go dry in between waterings. You often find that soils will get a sort of a crust on top, which may be composed of algae, or it may be because have a slightly hydrophobic soil component like peat. This sharp gravel actually somehow gets the water to go into the soil, whereas often the water would run around the side of the pot or off of the soil. And so the gravel is a really important horticultural component because it makes sure that water gets into the soil where it can do the plant some good. One thing you don't want in a potted plant are dry patches inside the soil because that's often where you'll get mealybug and dead roots and rot issues and stuff like that. Oh, I should quickly mention this bizarre plant. So there's this mesembs called Semaphora, and semaphoras are very interesting. So we had a couple of heat waves this summer, and these are little horticultural defects, or actually burns from last summer. But what I wanted to point out about Semaphora is how beautiful the leaves are when they emerge. They're purple, and you can see they're slightly shiny, and they actually exude a wax. And if we look here, we can actually see a piece of perlite stuck to the leaf there. In nature, these exude a bunch of wax onto their leaves. Sand blows around and sticks to the leaves, and they'll be completely covered in a coating of sand, which then protects them over the summer when it's hot and dry. In the winter, when the leaves pump up with water, the wax will crack off and the sand will fall to the ground, and then the plants can photosynthesize during the short days of winter. There are probably just a half a dozen types of Semaphora, but here you can see the wax is cracked off of these leaves here and leaves a little bit of this flaky wax behind. I think they're really charming and bizarre little plants. Very much worth growing. Okay, so
Soil amendments, but you did that. Medium view use. You ready to move on?
yeah, let's do another question.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is worth addressing or not, but Jerry asked, how do I get a copy of an updated version of Eddie Harris's table of mesembs growing dormancy seasons or equivalent?
No, move on.
Okay. Julie would like to know, and you addressed this a little bit with dry spots, how do you manage pest pressures?
Pest pressures. Ooh, I've never heard it called pest pressures before. Well, it's one of the lovely things about mesembs is they're relatively free of pests. And so I've never had any pests on Chirodopsis, never had a problem. Phyllobolus, never had a problem. I've never had a problem with pests on Gibeums. I'll show you a group of plants that have pests sometimes, and that is Titanopsis. Titnopsis and Aloanopsis. Stephen Hammer and I did a book on these plants, and in the process of making that book, I grew all of them out from seed, and they're really wonderful and not the easiest of mesembs for a number of reasons. This Titnopsis primosii, and they're really gorgeous plants, but down inside, next to the new leaves, here's flower buds coming out. You'll sometimes get mealy, and that can be quite annoying. And I don't have any right now. How do I manage that? Occasional use of systemic insecticide is how I do it. So I use a imidacloprid marathon in a powder format, which I spoon onto the soil and water in. And I tend to do that on a spot basis rather than across the entire collection. If your collection is quite small, manual removal with tweezers is perfectly reasonable. You can dab alcohol on mealies. If you have an indoor collection, you may have problems where things are a little dry and you'll get red spider mites. But for the most part, it's not a big problem with mesembs. But yes, some judicious application of systemic insecticide is worthwhile. Do you want to do another one?
Yeah, let's do one more. Rochelle would like to know, where do you sell your seeds? Do you allow nursery visits?
Okay. Where do I sell my seeds? And do I allow nursery visits? I often have people over to see my collection. You're welcome to contact me if you're in town, and I'd love to show you my plants in my greenhouse. I have another greenhouse actually that I share with my friend Solomon, who's probably watching. Hey. I sell a lot of seeds to Mesa Garden. So if you look for my collection numbers, they begin with RW. You'll see a lot of RW collections in the Mesa Garden catalog. I sell the very rare stuff on eBay sometimes, especially things like Gethalis, things that have fresh seeds, things that are make it worthwhile for me to pack them up and mail them. I don't sell $5 worth of seeds at a time, but I do sell $50 worth of seeds at a time. So if I can't make a lot of money with a little effort, then I send the bulk of stuff to Mesa Garden. Because I have a job. This is not my job, and I don't want it to be my job, right? This is just for fun. Cool. How are we on time?
It's 12:18.
It's 12:18. So I just want to do a check-in on time. How much more time should I go, John?
If anybody's bored, they can say so in the chat. I don't think anybody's bored. Keep going.
Okay, let's talk about my first true love in the mesembs. The first time I saw a Chirodopsis, I was transfixed. It was like the beginning of a romance novel. Only I'm a hortisexual. What can I say? Like I love plants, and someone in the mesem world once said to me that plants never disappointed them the way that people did. And I think I understand now what he meant. When something goes wrong with a plant, well, you can take it personally, I guess. But your plants are always a reflection of you, and your disappointment is something that you feel maybe more or less acutely than you would if you were disappointed by a human. Like I said, I don't get too upset when a plant dies, but I do get very excited when I see them alive. And gabayums are really nice. First of all, the name gabayum is lovely. It means little hump, and you can see they are little humps. And they're usually pretty easy to identify because you get one leaf that's distinctly larger than the other. This is Gabayum dispar. My friend Catherine Arthur, who lives in Spain, who I hope is online, told me she always has Gabayum dispar open on Christmas Day. And I noted that I did too this year, Catherine. And in fact, they continue to be open all the way through New Year's. And so it's a very nice, reliable thing for flowers. Have a garbage truck going by. But gabayums are actually large plants in nature. And just like with chirodopsis, I've found that as time goes on, I want to put them in bigger and bigger pots. This is a gabayum that is not widely grown. And again, it has a lot of really bad sunburn this year. And so we have some problems. But it's nice thing about mesembs is if you mess up the leaves one year, that you probably won't notice in a year or two because they replace their leaves all the time. And this is now in a gallon pot. But these things get quite big in nature. I was so surprised to see them because I grew these from seed. And for years they were small. And then I saw them in nature and they were big. And I was like, oh, I need to pot these up. And so slowly over time, I've learned this is, let's take a look at Gabayum heathii, because this is one of the species that actually has been given a bunch of names because they all have these very round, bulbous, spherical heads. This is probably the largest bodied of the Gabayum heathii. This one's from Ockert's Craw. Stephen took me to this spot right by a road back in 2003 when we went to South Africa together. But you also get something called Gabayum heathii. This one's from a place called Calcat. And you can see that the heads are much smaller and there are many, many of them. And I just noticed that this one's been munched. So it looks like I've had a snail or a mouse in the greenhouse damaging this. So actually back to the pest question, much more likely in a greenhouse of this type that you're going to have pests that are big. And by big, I mean they can take bites out of your plants. So mice, rats, and snails are particular problems. I've rarely had rodent problems because I keep compost nearby. And I think that the local rats and mice are very satisfied by my kitchen detritus, so they don't come into the greenhouse. I recommend that if you have rodent problems that you feed them outside the greenhouse. And I literally mean put out cat food for them. If you can't beat them, at least make them happy with something other than your precious plants. Or get a cat.
It's off topic, but can you do those beautiful inflorescences on the ground for everybody?
Oh, yeah. So we have many, many bulbs. We're not even getting to that part of the greenhouse, but I will show you Hemanthus and it's South African bulb. And the thing that's really nice about it on the edge of the flower, and they're down here on the floor of the greenhouse because this is one of the few that really have a weed in here, a little succulent weed, umbilicus. And these are actually hairy on the bottom of the bottom of the leaf, but those were always so unhappy and on the top of the bench, and then I realized, oh, they want to be in the shade. Those came from South African grower who's left us, Charles Crabe. Should we take one or two more questions, and then I'm probably out of time.
Can we, JD Weekert, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, JD, says, can we see your seed growing area in process, or do you want to talk about your seed process?
Oh, yeah. Come over here. Watch your step, Will. There's a hose in the way. So 95% of the stuff in this greenhouse I grew from seed. And I have a good reason to have done that. I spent a lot of my life not making any money, and seed are inexpensive. And so I could grow a lot of stuff. And then I realized in the process of doing that if you want to see the full diversity of just within a species, you have to grow it from seed. Every plant is different. Every tree is different. Every plant has a different color, texture, and shape. And that diversity is fascinating. And it also allows you the opportunity to begin to select for the most beautiful plants, to develop new varieties, to come up with new color forms and flowers and stuff like that. So I've gotten very into hybrid work lately. I do some sowing in the greenhouse, and I do some sowing under lights. I do a sowing between Christmas and New Year's every year, and all those are under lights in the basement. But if we take a look here, we'll take a look at this flat. What we have here are lithops that I sowed back in August. And some of them are just getting their first true leaves. So you can see the cotyledon leaves, which are sort of flat and featureless. And then you can see the first true leaves coming out. Typically, I won't transplant lithops until they get their first true leaves. But one thing I learned last year is that you really can't transplant lithops in the middle of winter. I did that in January last year because I had a lot of lithops that looked like this, and I lost a lot of plants. So I've had a lot of success sowing lithops this time of year. I've had a lot of success sowing them in the greenhouse in May. And these were sown in August, but I'll probably wait till March or April to start transplanting them. As for winter growers, I do them in a wide variety of ways. This is Athona retrofracta, which were sown on December 8th. And you can see they've come up and are growing. Very satisfying if you like fast and big things. This is, I bought a 1,000 seed from Mesa Gardens of Deneranthus wilmotianus impunctatus. This is the unspotted version of this. And I had 2 or 3 plants that weren't doing very well. And I decided I will be successful at growing this plant. And so I sowed the seed, 2 pots worth, and now I'm going to have far, far too many of them. And the problem with having this many of something is that this will easily satisfy the world market in this plant for years to come. There just will not be enough interest in this plant for me to part with these things, which is sad. And that means I'll have to dedicate lots of space to it at some point, which is not the worst thing in the world because it's a really cool plant. You can see how optimistic I am about this. I will get these to flowering size someday, hopefully. And then I'm going to show you, I'm not a conophytum specialist. I have a very small conophytum collection. All my conophytums fit on in 5 flats, 5 or 6 flats. And I've taken mainly an interest in the sort of gumdroppy ones like Conophytum burgeri and monii, Conophytum longum. So some of them are quite interesting, but this year I sowed a bunch of Conophytum seed, and they're incredibly tiny, and they stay small for a long time. Conophytums are a bit difficult from seed, primarily because they stay small for so long, and you actually have to get them. These plants won't get too much bigger than this before it's time to go dormant for the summer, and so figuring out how to get your Conophytum seedlings through the summer is a bit of a challenge. What some people do is actually cover them over with gravel. This was a pot of seedlings from last year that I got through the summer. There's Conophytum calculus in here, but I had 30 or 40 seedlings in there, and now I only have 4 plants. That's very upsetting. This is a Cubicum hybrid, of which I got maybe 15. And then here's Conophytum anthonii, of which there's a dozen or so. So we're sown 12/29/19, so they just turned a year old. So I'm trying to get good at growing Conophytums from seed, but certainly not the thing to start with. If you're going to grow mesembs from seed, start with Chirodopsis, move on to lithops, which are also very easy. And then once you get your bearings there, oh, I'm going to say something else about this. I find these people who buy seed from me, and they'll buy very expensive seed because I have some rare things that I'll offer, and they'll spend a lot of money, and they'll say, how do I grow this? Don't do that. Get cheap seed. Buy cheap seed. There's most of this stuff is so cheap, and so because mesembs produce so much seed, learn how to grow them, grow the cheap ones, and they're all beautiful and wonderful, and you don't need You don't need designer plants that you see online. Just get the species and grow them and get good at that. And then go spend $500 on some seed with me if you really need to. But don't spend money on seed. It's dumb. Okay.
Can we pop into this? Is a great question.
Sure.
Jerry. Jerry would like to know, what sources do you use to differentiate between winter growers and summer growers?
Oh, it's such a good question. Okay. It was such a weird surprise to me to learn that mesembs were winter growers. When I first started growing plants, to me, they were all summer growers because I grew up in a place where the rain falls in the summer, and every plant that we have grows in the summer. And it's so far outside of our conception that winter rainfall even exists unless you live in such a place. If you live in the Mediterranean, or if you live in South Africa, or you live in parts of Australia, or you live in California, this makes sense. But if you grew up in Georgia like I did, it doesn't. So the vast majority of mesembs are winter growers. And you can just assume that and then work to learn which ones are summer growers. So the list of summer growers is fairly small, but it includes lithops, probably the most common popular mesemb. So if you know that, then you know most of the summer growing mesems. But there are others, and there are many things that grow in winter rainfall areas that can be treated like summer growers. Here, let's quickly take a look at Argyroderma. It's a really good example. Argies are, well, first of all, Argyroderma means silver skin. Argy, like Argentina, refers to silver. Derma is skin. This is a very beautiful Argy patens. And these are from the Knaresvlakte, quartz fields, winter rainfall, West Coast South Africa. They are not strict winter growers. They're mostly opportunistic. These can be grown as summer growers. If you want to water these in the summer and leave them dry in the winter, they will do just fine. I actually treat them as winter growers, and I've switched them because I decided at some point that I wanted to actually grow them as winter growers to see if they'd be happier on that schedule. I don't see a big difference, to be honest. So you asked specifically about what sources do I use. The most useful thing is to know where the plant grows. And that actually is, you can get that from Heidi Hartman's books on the mesembs, the Springer books. They're very expensive, but she has maps of all the genera outlined where they grow. And if you know roughly where in South Africa, which is sort of like the south coast and the west coast of South Africa, is winter rainfall and everything else is summer rainfall, you can pretty much get a sense for where the summer things are. What are some other summer mesembs? They're not very popular. You get things like Pliosphilos. There's probably a reason why Pliosphilos are really well known in horticulture. They're summer mesembs. So you can sell them at Home Depot, and people can actually keep them alive because they don't require specialized winter conditions in a dry dormancy in the summer. So Pliosphilos, summer. An example of something that is very easy to treat as a summer grower is Glotophyllum. Glotophyllums grow in the Little Karoo, which is winter. They grow outside the Little Karoo and toward the east and north. Summer, they don't care. They just can be watered at any time. I think they like a rest at some point. This is Glotophyllum suave, I think, and with extremely richly sweet-scented flowers. So very much worth growing. I don't know if I really answered your question. Geography, and then you just have to learn a few things. Okay, let me put it another way. One more thing about time of year. There are actually only a few mesembs that have to be winter growers, that absolutely do not tolerate being grown in the summer. Conophytum is a really good example. Most conophytums have a strict summer dormancy. If you try to water them then and leave them dry in the winter, that will not succeed. So long experience? I don't know.
I think you kind of just touched on this following question, but I thought I'd expand on it. Do you have any advice for growing indoors if you don't have an outdoor space? Will lack of seasons kill your plants in the long run? I think it sounds like depends on.
Oh, yes, lack of seasons will kill your plants in the long run. It is true. But you have seasons indoors. And you're probably aware of how those seasons work. Indoors tends to be warm and dry in the winter. And plants are near a window, they see daylight. So have as much to do with water that's coming out of the sky as how much light is coming out of the sky. So winter is really short days. That's all it means. So so you can give plants shorter and longer days. People who grow marijuana professionally do this indoors all the time. They adjust the day length to trick the plants into believing that it's time to grow versus time to flower. So if you're growing marijuana, you give them long days when you want them to have to grow lots of leaves, and then you cut their days shorter and sometimes shift the color of the light in order to trick them into flowering. And in that way, you can take essentially an annual plant, which would normally flower in the fall, and you can have several crops a year. You can do the same thing with your mesembs or cacti or anything else. You just put your lights on a timer, and you give them short days when you want them to have short days, probably in the winter, and long days in summer. That said, I've never grown under lights other than seedlings, and so I'm really not the best person to give advice about that.
Russell, thank you. Can I just interrupt a moment, please?
Oh,
Russell. Because what we were hoping to do was to, after your session of giving a talk, we were hoping to move on to a general question and answer session and include Terry Smale in this as well, to give a perspective from the other side of the other side of the pond. So if we can stop that now, we can. This is either one of the hosts. Then we can move on to that in a few minutes if that's okay. Is that okay with you? It seems that you've actually frozen on us here. Sorry. No, can't hear anything from you. You seem to have gone.
From the video to my laptop. There's Terry. Hello.
Yeah. So, if we can just stop at this point for a second, I'd like to just thank you very much for that. Are you still able to hear us, Russell?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I'd like to hand over to Suzanne, please, if she's here, who's agreed to give the vote of thanks. Thank you. Suzanne, are you about?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you'll need to. You are unmuted. Yes, go on, please. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was a fascinating insight into your greenhouse and your collection, Russell. And it's not easy doing a talk. Wandering around the greenhouse looking at your plants and trying to get everyone to see what it is you're talking about. But there was a very good attempt, and thank you very much indeed. I know that lots of people have got lots of questions, so I don't think I'm going to rabbit on for too much. I'll just again say on behalf of everybody, all the different organisations that are part of this, thank you very much indeed for this evening or this morning or whatever it is where you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I know there are lots more questions. I've written some of them down. If anybody's got any specific questions that you'd like to ask both Russell and Terry, then if you can write them in the chat bar over the next few minutes. I think just to be fair on Russell, who's been speaking now for over an hour, it would be nice if we could give him a little bit of a break to just catch his breath and to get back. So I'm suggesting we're going to reconvene as it's now reconvene at 8:45 our time. So in about another 5 or 6 minutes, we'll reconvene and start. But for the next 5 minutes, we just have a general comfort break, a chance to visit wherever you need to visit and to grab a cup of coffee from the kitchen or make yourself a quick sandwich. And we will be back in about 5 minutes just to give everybody a chance. I don't know if John's still there.
I'm here, and yeah, I've given everyone the ability to unmute yourselves.
Yeah.
If you weren't watching in the chat, we did turn off your video because we thought that would help stop his freezing camera and audio. So feel free to unmute yourself and talk amongst yourselves. And yeah, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes.
So if anybody else got any questions, if I've written down some out of the chat, but if other people, other people would like to add anything, now's the chance to do it. The alternative as well, when we do come back to answering questions, is that you can raise your hand, which I believe is done through the 3 dots in the participants bar. So if you're, can you do that from your own icon, John?
You know, co-host can't raise your hand. That's why you're struggling to find it.
If anybody does have any questions, once we restart, if you go onto your own icon, you'll find 3 dots in the top right-hand corner. And if you press on there, you should be able to raise your hand. So anybody who wants to verbally ask a question can do that in a couple of minutes' time as well.
How do I start my video?
It's down at the bottom left.
I've tried to click it, doesn't work. Again, you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. That's what it says.
Oh, strange. Okay, yeah, I stopped it, but I'll try to find you and figure it out. Just a second.
Thank you.
Ivor?
Yeah?
Can I just say a bit about the bulletins that are yet still sitting on my office table here waiting to be mailed? That's the ones that are going outside of the UK. I do hope to get them on their journey on Monday. Okay, and I do apologise to those people who have been anticipating them arriving when the bulletin was delayed and various things have gone wrong as per usual, but they are all done up, ready to go.
I think even those people in Britain who've had their journals in the post for a while, the bulletins in the post for a while, have found some difficulties with our postal systems. I know several of the sorting offices in the north of England have just been completely snowed under. So it is taking a lot longer than it normally does this year for things to get through to Britain, and presumably the same abroad as well.
Ivor, some of them arrived within 1 day.
And some still haven't.
I got the subs back the following day.
Yeah, I've got my one. Thanks, Suzanne. Lovely addition.
Yeah, for everybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, the person who was speaking was Suzanne Mace, and she's the editor of the Mesemb Study Group journal, or bulletin as it's called. I'm holding it up right now. You can see it. And it's a great little newsletter that you can get 4 times a year that has a lot of information, specifically a lot of habitat, historical information. There's always an article about how some plant got its name, and a lot of times it's a farmer's daughter in South Africa it was named after, or something like. It seems like it's a great way to get to know some farmers' daughters from the mid 20th century. And wonderful, wonderful pictures from habitat and articles from really people like Russell who know a lot about mesembs. So.
And how long has this bulletin been produced? It's 26 years or something now, isn't it?
Years.
Unbelievable.
Years.
What an awesome service. Thank you so much.
It's a long time.
We're just moving into our 36th year.
36.
You must have been 14 when you started producing it, Suzanne.
I was only 6.
Who's making tea or coffee right now? I'm making coffee.
Oh, I'm glad you said that because I think I want some.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do that in a minute.
Well, I just got a mic, so I can let you know I'm making some queso with Fritos. How about that?
Ooh.
But no camera. Sorry, guys.
Russell, are you a huge coffee person? Do you do like single origin or just like grocery?
Oh my God, I've actually kind of nerded out about coffee. I found this coffee YouTube channel I've been watching, and then I just bought. I bought a coffee scale. I weigh my coffee now. I got a coffee subscription. I get like a new kind of coffee from some roaster in America. Like every couple of weeks, another kind of coffee comes. I don't know
Where did you get that? Because you've just out nerded me on the coffee. Do you hand pour?
I have an office job, but there's no office. So we had really great coffee at my workplace, and now I have to make it at home all the time. So I actually use I got a mocha pot. This is my favorite way to make coffee these days.
Oh wait, where do you get the subscription from?
The company I'm using is called Trade. Trade.com. Yeah. It's pretty nice. Yeah, I get a couple bags of coffee and it's been pretty good so far. Yeah.
Nice.
That's the famous Bay Area tech company Perks, right? Employee Perks.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know those well.
We had cold brew coffee on tap at my job. So they want to keep you wired for sure. Productive.
Well, Russell, we're now approaching the time where we said we'd restart, but if you want another couple of minutes to finish your coffee off.
No, I've got an assistant for this. He's
you're okay.
My cameraman Will, and he's making the coffee, so we're fine.
I'm just going to pick up on one point that I've seen in the chat that was there.
Эта конференция записывается.
One of the points I've seen in the chat that was there was that I think Eddie's in the room at the moment, but Eddie Harris has done a cultivation guide for all the different genera, and I know at least one other person has. I don't know if these are generally available and if the authors of them would permit them to be made more public, but I'll certainly make some inquiries in the next week or so to see if we can get those put either on the MSG website or on the Facebook page or on both, so that they can be made a bit more available to people. So I can work on that one. That's one of the questions dealt with. So I think now we move on to the questions section, don't we? So I'd like to we've met Russell already. Terry, are you here? Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
First of all, can I say hello, Russell? It must be something like 18 years since you were here in the UK with Steve Hammer.
That's right. 2003, I remember distinctly. You picked us up at the airport, and I tried to get in the wrong side of the car.
I know. A lot of Americans make that mistake, and Europeans as well, of course.
So,
and also I noticed another person here earlier from the USA, George Lombard, who's visited us here in Epsom. And if he's still around, hello, George, as well.
Gone very quiet.
Yeah. Can I also say that I have recently written an article on growing the winter mesembs that was published in the December Cactus World, which is the journal of the British Cactus and Succulent Society. And if anyone wants a PDF of that, I can be contacted via my website.
Thank you. If anybody doesn't know, Terry's the chairman of the Mesemb Study Group and has been growing mesembs for a good many years now. Shall we leave it at that, Terry? A good many years.
I've been growing succulents generally for 55 years, but the conophytum craze started in the mid-80s.
Yeah, right. So to kick things off, I noticed we've got Brock Jones in the audience who's raised his hand. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, Brock?
Yeah. Hey, I mostly have grown tropical plants in the past and just
sorry, Brock, to interrupt you for a second. Can you tell us where you're from, please?
Yeah, I'm in Toledo, Oregon. I'm about 10 minutes inland from the coast of Newport area. So I'm in about a 9A zone, and I have a sunroom that I grow tropical plants in. And I also I was thinking about setting up a small grow room for succulents and mesembs, and giving them like a nice ceramic metal halide light to grow them out really nice and colorful for a project I'm working on. And I guess what I wanted to know really is, do you think that mesembs could possibly be grown quicker and more prolifically, and even with more interesting structures and colors, if they were grown underground the way they are in the wild?
Can I throw that question to Russell first, please? You muted Russell as well.
I think he ran away for a second.
I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
Well, actually, there's going to be a talk at the end of the month with Brian Kimball at the Ruth Bancroft Garden, and he's going to talk about growing mesembs outdoors. And he's going to feature over 100 mesembs that they grow outside here in California. I will say that although most mesembs can be grown higher up than they would normally want to grow, that's fairly unusual, and they tend to want to be down in the ground, and so that's their sort of natural state. So I would totally agree that you're going to get the best results if they're grown low and kind of hard, as opposed to lush.
Yeah, but it'll just need to be a drier environment, correct? Because the reason people grow them above ground, I guess, is to keep them drier, because in their natural environment they're drier. So I was thinking my tent I could keep really dry, and then when I want to use them in a display, I would acclimate them and remove the material from around them and acclimate them to be above ground in a more in like the home environment where it's more humid. So I just didn't know if I could get better results growing them and get some really interesting growth and quicker growth, maybe if I grew them the way they were meant to be, with some really powerful light above them. Just didn't know if your experience told you that. And it's probably a kind of a weird question, actually, I suppose, but.
Terry, do you want to add something to that?
Well, first of all, I'll say that here in the UK, very few of us use any ancillary lighting. But the first talk in this series, back in October, Matt Opel in New England gave a talk about growing these winter growing mesembs. And he uses lights within his domestic house and gets really good results. He can grow some of the most difficult mesembs and flower them. And a lot of my contacts in Korea and China, they're living in apartments and they're using auxiliary lighting to grow their mesembs. So although we don't have much experience in the UK, it certainly can be done. And by getting the right light levels, you can maintain good color on your plants right through the growing season. The problem we have in the UK is that we can have good color when they start into growth in August, September, October. But once we get into midwinter with our 4 or 5 hours of daylight, rarely sunlight, then they just all turn green. So it's really in the middle of the winter here that we need more light on our plants.
Thanks, Terry. I know we said we'd have a panel of 2, but if we've got experts here, we might as well use them. I see Matt stop chewing. Would you like to unmute yourself and jump in with a quick answer to that, Matt, or any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I've grown both in greenhouses, either with natural light or with some supplemental light out in the greenhouse with, HPS lights. And I definitely grow a lot of plants at home under fluorescent lights and now LED lights. And yeah, it's definitely a matter of watching what the plants are doing, watching how they're coloring up or turning green and horrible looking, and trying to get the light levels right and trying to get the day length right and all that.
Are there any technical details that you can add to this, such as what strength of lights you use and what distance from the plants you grow?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many options now for LED lights that I use mainly at home right now. What I've got is kind of a mixture of ordinary shop lights from the hardware store, these sort of long LED tubes that you'd have in an office building. but with a cooler color spectrum. So like a 600 or 6500 Kelvin color spectrum, sort of a more bluish light, and some wide spectrum sort of purpose-made LED grow lights, which, you know, you can go on to eBay or Amazon and find a lot of options, and they're, you know, all probably pretty much about the same sort of thing. I think I wind up with, you know, in an area of plants the size of an office desk, I've probably got about 150 watts worth of light.
Right, thank you. Brock, does that answer your question?
Sort of. I guess I was more actually concerned about the growing them underground. What I'm doing is I'm probably going to use about a 60 by 60 inch grow tent with a dehumidifier, and I was going to put about 3 levels in the 80 inches and actually use the same 315 watt ceramic metal halide to light up 3 levels, so that each level will get 8 hours of light at a different time, and I'll recirculate the air so they'll all stay warmer out in my garage or in my shop because it's cooler here. So that way I can actually have the daylight cycles, but have that one 315 watt ceramic metal halide heating it all, so I don't have to run a heater. So I really was, and then I'm use some supplemental LED lighting. I guess what I was really thinking about is underground growing, where I guess, you know, where they grow the mesembs in the wild, a lot of them are growing underground with little windows that allow light down into the plant. And I just didn't know if I could do something really cool with that kind of like.
I just want to say that's how they grow. So you don't have to do anything special. You actually have to work to not grow them that way, right? They just grow that way. So just grow them the way they want to, and you're done.
Oh, it'll be interesting to see. I guess I have so little experience with anything like that with the mesembs or succulents.
Start them from seed and see what they do. You'll see.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Totally.
I would say that although some mesembs grow more or less below ground, and for instance, I actually described one called Conophytum subterraneum because it lives buried in quartz patches. Most of them are reasonably well exposed. Most of the Chirodopsis that we've been shown this evening, and the gabaeums, for instance, they're all growing on the surface of the very often quartz fields. And though some of the conophytums are buried, a lot of them are still well above ground, things like minutum or calculus. They're growing well above ground. So it's only a proportion of mesembs which are actually growing substantially buried.
Okay. As an example of one that is often grown much above ground and somewhat to my consternation is Finistraria, where you know, in nature the windows really are at the surface of the soil, which is really deep sand where it grows. But in cultivation, they often grow up like fingers, and they call them baby toes. And I always feel quite successful when mine grow flat, but when they grow up, I feel like I've failed. But you know, so I guess the question, so that sort of, you know, I think we strive to keep the ones that are small and subterranean like that in a pot, because we feel cool when we do it and less cool when we don't, you know. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that's if I get a lithops that grows tall out of the pot, I feel like that's just a horrible horticultural defect, and I want to cut the top of the plant off.
It's just called Lithops salicola.
Yeah, okay. Yes. But you always get a little rogue lithops that will do that, and not always salicola, you know, and then so it's a bit funny. I actually just, Terry, started Subterraneum from seeds that Matt Opal sent me. So I'm very excited to finally have it. Yeah.
It grows fairly easily. It's not a problem plant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I suppose the real answer to this, Brock, is that you need to go away and set this up and come back and tell us in 12 months' time how successful you've been.
Okay, I hear you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I don't think there's a huge experience of growing, and there's no real rights and wrongs by the sound of it. It's just by
Can I ask a
experience.
question of Terry, because I know he's such an expert on conophytum cultivation, and that is, is there a way to speed up certain conophytums? I have, for example, hameri, but they're really quite tiny for me still. But I've seen really quite big ones, and by big, maybe an inch or so across. Are they just?
That's gross.
Oh, really?
Under my conditions, a mature hammery is probably about 10 millimeters across.
Oh, really?
Less than half an inch. If it's that size, they've been pumping it up with something.
I see.
Hybrid.
Okay, I'm going to move on a little bit, if you don't mind, please, because I've got several people waiting to ask questions. Somebody known to me only as D. Do you want to unmute and ask your question, please? You've gone. No, vanished. Are you still there? Are you still there, D? You still want to ask a question? I think the next one was Andrew Butcher's then. Andrew. Do you want to unmute and ask your question, please?
He just said he or she asked his question in the chat. So, okay, I have two questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One leads on from earlier on, but the first one is, I grew some lithops all back in 2018. I started to germinate them, and it got to the autumn of that year, and some of them started to die off. And bear in mind what's been said about them being summer growing, but what I noticed was that they started to produce some of their adult leaves, their first true leaves, and if I hadn't fed them at that time, they would have died off. Subsequently, in subsequent years, it seems that during the summer they need to be watered and fed. So what, I suppose in a nutshell, what my question is there different time spans for juvenile and adult lithops? And my second question would be about the lighting. Has anybody tried specific aquarium lighting that's designed for plants, aquarium plants? Has anybody tried that at all?
Can I throw that one to Terry?
Different light value. Aquarium lights are actually a different light value. They're more white. Where the grow the grow LEDs are more the bluey red light. So I don't think they would work.
Okay, I'll take the lithops. And what I tend to do with seed raising is really mimic the growth of the adult plants. So the winter growing mesembs that Russell was concentrating on, I grew the seed during I sow the seed once the weather has cooled off. And I think that when you would sow them would vary depending on where you were. Southern California, you're probably going to sow early autumn. Here in the UK, I actually sow my winter mesembs the same time as Russell, because I actually sowed them on New Year's Day. And he's obviously sown them very recently also. But the winter growing mesembs are going to be sown under cool conditions. So when it comes to summer growing things like lithops, then I sow them end of March into April, when the conditions are getting much better in the UK greenhouse. And they probably don't require any auxiliary lighting at that time. A little bit of shade through the first summer. You will almost invariably find that they produce their first adult leaves by about August. And I would stop watering those seedlings around about mid-October, which is the same time as I stop watering adult lithops under my conditions. So really with everything, when raising seed or when propagating vegetatively, I tend to try to do it to fit the way in which the adult plants would grow.
Terry, I have a slightly different approach, and I know it's very different here in California than in the UK, but one thing I've noticed about lithops is that you can actually keep them growing continually for the first year and actually get several leaf moltings in the first year to 8 to 18 months. You can get 2, 3, 4 sets of leaves. And the advantage to this is that you don't have to let them go dormant when they're very small. But the best way to be successful at that, in my experience, is to actually do this under lights. And when I grow lithops from seed, in the past, I would leave them under 24-hour lights for the first 6 months, and also fertilize quite heavily. So, and so the advantage of that is you get several leaf moltings. You get them to quite a decent size in a year, and then you can move them into the collection and treat them like adults. So it's a different approach, but it is sort of interesting to me. It goes back to the question, are juvenile plants different than adult plants? And my experience is that they can be. You can treat them like adult plants like Terry does, or you can say, okay, you don't know from seasons yet. You're a little baby seedling. So I'm just going to give you all the light and fertilizer in the world for the first year. And commercially, lithops are grown to sellable size in 18 months. Literally a full adult size plant in 18 months. And the way this is done is pumping them full of fertilizer. It doesn't make for a plant that people can take home and keep alive, but it does prove that you can move them on quite fast. And I actually think that this is one of the reasons why people consider lithops difficult, because if you buy one at your local florist or Home Depot or whatever, it's some plant that is literally 18 months old, has been pumped up with fertilizer, and is ready to collapse under your conditions, which it will.
Yeah, it's interesting that I think we're varying the way we grow things because we've got such different conditions. Mm-hmm. In the UK, there's a very significant danger period around about November and December, when we don't have particularly low temperatures, but in the greenhouse, we're approaching 100% relative humidity. Mm. And if I tried to keep lithops seedlings growing under those conditions, I would kill a lot of them because there's so many fungi floating around in the atmosphere at that time. If I had some sort of special grow room with lights and in a drier environment, yes, I could keep them going. Mm-hmm. So I just give them that first 6 months. But then when we come to conophytums, I actually do what you do with your lithops, because I've just done my conophytum sowing, and I actually never stop watering them now until April 2022. Because under the UK conditions, as long as I give them a bit of shade during the summer, I can just keep them growing right through that period with just a very, very short dormancy in the very hottest weather. So I'm doing effectively with conos what you're doing with lithops, and we can't get away with it doing it the other way around under our differing conditions.
It's very fascinating because this past year, I finally discovered that a lot of things that I've struggled with as seedlings, the reason is because I gave them too much light in the summer. So I built a bench in my other greenhouse, which I put heavy shade cloth on during the summer. And so I take all of my winter, like I did a really nice batch of Adromiscus, but I put them in deep shade and keep them watered all summer for the first year. And that has proven to be the key to success. And also with Haworthias. And now I'm hearing I should probably try to do that with my conos as well, is get them shaded and keep them going through that first summer.
Yeah, because, you know, I could have shown you trays of seedlings which were sown 12 months ago, and I think of conophytums, and they would be appreciably larger, I think, than the ones that you showed us. But you could probably do better with lithops. So it's just dependent on where we live.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Andrew?
Yes, thank you. Thanks all.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for your question. I found the question by D, which was in the chat, which was, I got my first conophytum last year, and I'm not sure what to do with it. Should I be watering it right now? I don't know if Dee would like to just quickly add into the chat whereabouts she's from, then I can tell everybody, because she doesn't actually say what part of the world she lives in. But we can throw it over to both sides of the pond. Yeah, Terry, do you want to answer it first?
Yes, is the answer to the question. Please go and have a look at my website. Just Google Terry Smale or Smale Conophytum, and you'll get to my website where I've got a page on how I grow Conophytum. And they very much fall into the winter growing regime, which Russell was telling us about earlier. And I start watering Conophytums somewhere end of July, early August. They're watered right through the winter, and I usually stop in April. Having said that, at the moment in the UK, we've got almost zero sunshine, 5 hours of daylight, about 5 degrees centigrade in the greenhouse. So I have very much cut back for the time being on watering my Conophytums. But I think in Northern California, you can almost certainly be watering them well now. What do you say, Russell?
Oh, absolutely. I did a big watering just yesterday or the day before because I wanted things to look as nice as possible during the talk. And I did worry a little bit because, like you, in the doldrums of winter, I'm much more cautious because the plants take a very long time to dry out. But I remember getting my first Conophytum, and there's something to be said about the range of difficulty within that very large genus. And depending on which one you have, it can be very forgiving. If you're growing Conophytum bilobum or something very tough and robust, it might not care when you water it. It could be just quite easy, right? Which is a very different, but there are very difficult Conophytums. And so that's where, you're going to learn possibly by killing the plant, or possibly you're going to discover that this is the perfect plant for you because it's so easy. So, yeah, but they are entirely winter growers. And so the real challenge with Conophytum is not knowing when to water it, but when not to. I think that being willing to let your plant go dry and dormant when you're new to it is one of the most terrifying things for people. And that's where I think we often go wrong, is we keep watering the thing because we don't want it to look dead.
Dee's just added that she's in Northern California, so I presume that sort of thing fits for her current location. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Jorge, you've had your hand up for a while. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, Northern California, the Bay Area is Central Coast, but anyways. Yeah, my question was getting away from all the miniature mesembs. I had a question as far as landscaping. I have a lot of cacti in my collection. I was using Delosperma and Lapranthus, and I just tore them out because they were taking over the garden, kind of like Carpobrodus. So I've stuck to Caryopsis, the compact ones that don't get too big and suck all the water away from the cacti. Mainly Clysteo cactus, Labivius, so like South American types. I wanted to know what are some good mesembs that are that go good with landscaping. They're the macro, the larger ones. So I've read about Stobaria. I've seen some Ruchias like Ruchia maxima. I was wondering if anybody had experience in growing those with larger cacti. So
one thing I'll say about Stobaria is that actually one of the species holds the record for being the tallest growing Mesembrianthemum, and that they can get up to something like 2.5 meters tall in the wild. But they are upright growing. The problem with carpet brutus that you mentioned is that, they're carpet forming and they smother everything in their path.
Yeah, we got enough of that, not in the highways and all of that where we live.
There's parts of the UK where they're naturalized and smothering all the native vegetation. So basically, you need to select well-behaved, upright growing plants. And it's really a question of going through the literature to find some bushy mesemms rather than carpeting mesemms.
I can also say that here in the Bay Area, there are many types of mesembs that are offered in the local nurseries. You get Lampranthus and Chrysanthemum and Appentia.
Well, that can be a bit of a thug.
It can, absolutely. That'll take over the world, won't it? So there are many options at the local nurseries. And if you really want to know more about growing outdoor mesemms, Brian Kimball's talk at the end of the month is going to be perfect because it's all going to be Bay Area focused.
Yeah, I have some of his from outdoors, but I guess I was looking for something that were larger than maybe a meter or 2 meters. Yeah.
You have an endless supply of shrubby mesemms, but they're not widely cultivated, primarily because they're fairly large and most of them have relatively uninteresting flowers.
Okay, so they're not interesting horticulturally then.
I mean, I find them interesting horticulturally, but the rest of the world doesn't, right? Strawberry is a good example. They have small little white flowers. I grew Strawberry arborea. Actually, Terry, I saw on one of Ernst's sheets at the Compton Herbarium, he recorded a 5-meter tall Strawberry arborea. So I'm not sure I believe that, but I did read it on a sheet. So
it's impressive if it exists.
Yeah, right.
Can I say, as far as your mesemms are concerned, have you had to go at the various forms of is it Chrysanthemum speciosum?
We have
it grows a lot around my neighborhood.
In the nurseries here.
It grows a lot around
here.
They get to about a meter tall, and they are very flamboyant in their flowering.
No, the flowers are beautiful. My neighbors grow it. I don't want it because it's too common and it just takes over kind of too eventually. It would grow over my lobevias. I mean, the only ground spreading one that I've seen, they use it as a replacement for lawns, is Ruchia nana. That's probably the only one I would allow because it's a weed barrier. It's really like about 5 centimeters maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pushing it now in Southern California as a replacement for xeriscaping, lawn replacement.
I've done really well with Chirodopsis outside in the ground. I think they're great, nice, tight shrubs. That would be my number one recommendation for something that could grow alongside cacti outside here.
That's the only one I have right now. That and a cephalophyllum, I think, yeah.
Another good choice, yep.
Thank you.
Has that answered your question, Jorge?
Yeah, it gives me some insight. I mean, I guess that all the ones I want, I'd have to probably grow from seed or try to find it. That you're not going to find them at nurseries.
Yeah, sometimes there isn't a quick answer, is there, to a question like that?
No.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
I am aware there's a couple more people with their hands up. I will get them to you in a minute, but I'm going to take one of the questions out of the chat bar if I can at the moment from Margarita from the San Francisco area, which is Dinteranthus, Aloeanthus, Lapidaria and Lithops. Can these be grown in the same pot with the same watering schedule? So, since she's from San Francisco, Russell, would you like to answer that first?
It's a good question. Lapidaria is one of. So what do we have? Dinteranthus, Lithops, Lapidaria, and something else.
Aloeanthus.
Oh yeah, okay. Aloeanopsis probably. I would say yes. You could absolutely try that. My caveat would be that Dinteranthus tends to want less water than those other plants and tends to be a little more rot prone. I just am a little more careful with them because I consider it a slightly more difficult plant. But all of those things are pretty flexible in their watering schedule. So even Aloeanopsis, most of which are from winter rainfall areas, are perfectly fine to grow as summer plants. Lapidaria as well. It's probably wants to be a winter grower, but does just fine as a summer grower for me as well. I water it with my Lithops. So, what do you think, Terry?
The one that I would not include there is the Aloeanopsis. or because a lot of those with me could pack up completely during the summer months. And some of the Alohanopsis I actually put in a cold frame for the summer because they hate the heat of the greenhouse. And some of them are growing really well at the moment and will be flowering in March. So Alohanopsis I wouldn't include, but the other three genera which were mentioned, I do treat those more or less the same. So as long as the soil is generally well drained, and the compost that I use in the UK is basically half commercial potting compost and half of a coarse grit. So for all the plants which we've been talking about this evening, what we need basically for growing them in is really well drained open composts.
I would add that although I really admire people who do beautiful staging of plants and make dish gardens and stuff like that, I find it easier to grow the plants in individual pots because of their individual needs. And so it allows me to be able to go and specifically water the Denteranthus when it needs to be watered, and specifically water the Lithops when it needs to be watered, especially during those transition times when certain things are waking up and certain things are going to sleep. It's very difficult to spot water within a community pot. So it's great if you, I mean, they can be beautiful effect, but it does make the horticulture more difficult, I think, when you grow things in the same pot.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that, but I also concede that a lot of people like growing miniature landscapes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think as long as you stick to plants with more or less the same watering regime, then you stand a chance.
Absolutely.
Right, we've got a big thank you from Margarita to the panelists for that one in the chat bar. So thank you, guys. The next one with the hand up was Chris and Jan. When anybody unmutes themselves to ask a question, can I ask, please, if they'll give their location as well, so as we know which part of the world you're from. So, Chris and Jan, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Ivor. This one's for Terry, really. He advised me in one of the BCSS talks to put my connos in January. I put the seeds in yesterday. I just wondered a minimum temperature possibly for them. They're in a south-facing window with a no heat at the present time.
It sounds to me as though that's probably quite a good situation. I assume that you've got heating in your house. And, you know, a nighttime temperature of maybe 8 or 10 degrees up to 15 to 20 degrees during the daytime, I think is a good temperature range for germinating conophyton seeds. Don't know how that fits in with your conditions.
Yeah, maybe we're a little bit cooler than that. But the only propagator I've got runs a bit too hot for them. It's sort of 25, 30 degrees, which is going to be too warm for them. So
yeah, that is a bit too hot.
I'll leave them as they are. The other question was, how do you get the seeds out of your conophytums? With the lithops, we tend to just take the pods off and plunge them in water, in a bowl of warm water, which works very well for us. Do you do similar with the conos?
I do absolutely the same. I like to leave seeds on the plants until the autumn, or say August, following the August after they flowered in the previous year, which helps to sort of complete the ripening of the seed. I harvest in August, keep the capsules in little paper envelopes, and then when I got a little bit of spare time in the autumn, I just put them on top of, throw them into a small beaker of water. The capsules will open up in water within a few minutes. And then I just use a pair of tweezers and a needle to scrape the seeds out into the water. The seeds sink, whereas the capsules float. I then just decant the water from the seeds and spread the seeds out on a bit of filter paper to dry. and I would do exactly the same with lithops.
Yeah, that's exactly what we've been. Okay, thank you very much, Terry. Much
I want to offer up a different method. First of all, I agree. I leave the capsules on the plants. In fact, I harvest after I first see the capsules open when I water. Then I know they're really ripe and ready, and they're easy to identify. But I break the capsules open with my fingers dry. And most mesem seed have quite round seeds. So if you do this on a piece of white typing paper, you can shake and the seeds will roll off and leave most of the capsule material and flower parts behind. It's not perfect, but it's much faster than putting them in water. So I haven't used the water method myself. I understand why it would work, and I had never thought that, okay, the seeds sink and that's actually an advantage, but I break my capsules open dry and clean them with my thumbnails.
Very interesting.
As far as I'm concerned, that's okay if you are going to sow the seed.
Mm-hmm.
If that seed is going to a dealer or to a society and then going outside of the UK, and this has become more pertinent since the 1st of January, that seed has got to be inspected at some point for plant health matters. And if the health inspector sees a load of debris still in with the seeds, and it's very difficult to remove the debris from the seeds when you crush them like that, they're almost certainly not going to give it a plant health certificate. So, okay for your own use, but if it's going to leave the country, then I think the seeds need to be cleaner and free of debris.
It's also worth...
Sorry, go on, Russell.
Oh, it's also probably worth noting that that debris that's left behind can also be a nice place for pathogens to grow. And so especially for very tiny things like conophytums, and if you I like to sow certain things on sterilized soil, having bits of seed capsule and stuff in there is probably not the best thing because you get fungus growing on it. So yeah, having the seed very clean is actually really smart.
I picked up in part of that question that somebody's growing seed in a propagator, an electric propagator. Now, most electric propagators have one set temperature, whereas plants that germinate in habitat often have a much colder nighttime temperature than they do daytime temperature. So as an additional to both of you, please, does it make any difference if you actually start growing them in just the same temperature, or is it beneficial to have these changes in temperature during the course of the day?
Okay, without any evidence whatsoever, and Russell may be able to provide some, I do believe that succulent plant seed generally germinates better if there's a big day-night variation in temperature.
Yeah.
Now, I achieve that. I use a propagator in a greenhouse, and that propagator has got it's about 2 foot square with a 50-watt heating mat in the base and no thermostat. And that heating mat raises the temperature in that propagator by about 5 degrees above the ambient temperature in the greenhouse. Now, on a cold winter's night, it can go down to about 3 degrees in there. So about 8 degrees in the propagator. If the sun did come out by some sort of accident, it might get up to 20 degrees during the daytime. But by having a heating mat on all the time and no thermostat, I do achieve that day-night variation. I do believe that there are some quite sophisticated heat controllers around that people can use if they want to. So do you think they need a diurnal variation, Russell?
Oh, absolutely. I've found, in fact, I've been doing more sowings directly in my greenhouse than indoors under lights because I find I'm getting such good results in the greenhouse. It's been more difficult in the past because I wasn't home as much, but now that I'm home all the time, I can check on things. And we have very here in the Bay Area, it's cold at night, even in the summer, and so that fluctuation between warm summer days and cool summer nights definitely seems to stimulate, especially lithops. I've had such good success, more so than when I keep things on a very steady temperature heat mat or indoors. Yeah, I agree. I don't have any side-by-side comparisons, but just my experience over the last 15 or 20 years, I do believe that temperature fluctuations are helpful.
Mm-hmm. I don't actually think I've seen any proper written up experimental work.
Let's do it.
I hope you've got more spare room than I have.
Chris, does that answer your question for you?
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Very, very patiently waiting has been Nasser Mohammed, who's had his hand up for what seems like 2 days. Would you like to unmute yourself, Nasser, and to ask your question?
Yeah. So can everyone hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
My name is Nasser. I live in the U.S. in a state called Michigan, kind of in the northeast side of. Yeah, very, very cold. A lot of snow here, and it's it's too cold to have a greenhouse. Pretty much nobody has a greenhouse here. I've been growing mesembs for a while, around 6 years or so, and these days I've been growing a lot of Vanheerdia. I just find them to be kind of cool looking, and in the wild they seem to have a nice sun-stressed color. And with all my mesembs, I really want them to have the sun-stressed reddish color usually. And since it's not super sunny, I find this kind of difficult to achieve. And I've heard various people seem to have different methods for achieving this color. Some people use a different soil, I think. Some people claim that if you have a shallower pot, you can get a more sun-stressed color. I was wondering just if anyone had any advice or experience stressing their plants, or any strategies they use to give them that, the reddish colors they have in nature.
Do I have to pick? I'll pick Russell. Go on.
Well, I mean, the colors that you see are vary through the year, and it's almost impossible and probably not very desirable to have those colors in the middle of winter. You probably just can't do it, and the days aren't long enough, and you don't really want to stress your plants at this time of year anyway, I don't think. What you're going to find is that the plants will color up in the spring as they would go dormant, and will probably have their maximum color right at the cusp of dormancy. And then with your Vanheerdias, they're going to sheath over in the summertime, and so they're going to look kind of like dry, papery sheaths over the leaves, most likely. And so there, you're not going to, the colors you're going to have are going to be tans and browns, right? So I would, and that's actually one of the beautiful things about mesembs, is they undergo these really dramatic changes in color and texture and stuff like that. So consider that something that's going to happen seasonally and not all the time. And this is actually kind of one of the problems with the internet, right? We see lots of still pictures of plants, and I've got so many pictures of plants in my collection. And it's nice to be reminded that there is 1 week of the year that Conophytum mirabile is going to be in stunning flower, right? And this week it'll be a fuzzy little blob, and in the middle of the summer it's gonna look dead. It's so wait for it. It'll come.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's good to know, because I'd always been expecting them to have the tanned color during the growing season, but yeah, I guess.
It's interesting, and in nature they really will, but it's very hard to reproduce the situations that they're in nature. I've heard people say, if you just track the weather in South Africa, then you can water the plants like they're watered in nature, or you can just mist them because they grow in fog. If you tried to grow plants like nature, you would kill all your plants. You just can't do it. Life in a pot in Michigan is very different, and you got to take what you can get.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure that the main factor is light. Light levels. In the UK, my Conophytum, things like Conophytum pellucidum, got fantastic colours through August, September. Now they're all green. And it's just the poor light that we got now. I've got friends in Korea. What's Seoul? Somewhere around 38 degrees latitude, isn't it? We're about 52 degrees. And the colours that my friends in Korea get on their condos are far more intense than I can get. So it's light levels. So if you can work out the right colors for LEDs and get the right intensity of light, then I think that is your best way of getting better colored winter growing succulent plants under your conditions.
Okay, yeah, that's really good advice. I will definitely.
There was an article in the British Journal earlier in 2020 where a lady was growing echeverias or echeverias, if you prefer, was growing those. And all the collection were in rooms and they were all under lights. And with the intensity and color of light that she was using, she had really good colors on her various echeveria plants. So it can be done but you've got to work out the right wavelengths and the right intensities.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah,
Hey,
thank you.
I'd like to say something to, do you call him Nasser?
Nasser, yeah.
Nasser. Not to directly refute what Russell said, but just from my own experience, in the past, I've raised reptiles, a lot of exotic animals, and, ran garden shops, pond consultant, and arborist, all kinds of things with plants. And one of the things I've noticed in my home in Oregon, because in Oregon, we have a lot more, it's just dark here all winter. So I really like having bright lights on all the time and actually simulating summer in my home. So my wife ends up hanging out underneath my fishtail palm where I've got a huge LED up above it. And she's in there. And when it goes off, she's like, oh my goodness. I felt like I was working on the beach until that thing went off. And what's interesting is what happens is we can actually do a better job with our plants. The same way Russell was talking about watering. It's like, you can't really ask me about watering unless you're going to tell me about what soil it's in, the way you want to water, or you can't ask me about soil unless you give me all the complicated details so I can work all this out for you. And really what I want you to do is understand it. And so with the lighting, say in the winter, because the air is cooler, the humidity goes down because the air can't hold as much moisture. So you might be in a better position to do your mesembs, to grow your mesembs better by giving them their summer in your winter by using the right lighting. So you can actually change, you choose the cycle. You choose when you want to do that. What Russell's saying, though, is, you may exhaust the plant or you may cause problems if you try to do that every other day, but you get to choose. So, and with lighting, what you want to do is the LEDs are great. They're really cool, and you can find I use some really nice ones, but if you really want to make a plant stressed out and color up, you could try, you want to use a black body type of light, which is basically a light. It's kind of like the difference between digital and analog. An analog has all the curves and you hear all the nuances of the guitar, whereas digital, they filter a bunch of stuff out. And the LEDs are going to filter a bunch of that light spectrum out, whereas a black body light that gets really hot, so you're going to be dealing with heat, is going to give you a spectrum that can stress your plant out more. So I use, for instance, a ceramic metal halide lights are more efficient than normal metal halides. They use less energy and produce a lot of light, and the bulbs last a lot longer. And so like a 315 watt ceramic metal halide 4200K bulb is going to stress them out and make them beautiful. I have some succulents out in my grow. I have a grow room that they're actually in my grow room where the humidity is high, but they don't care. They're getting beautiful, red tips and colors on them. So just try a really, you're going to have to invest in a really nice light. But you can play around with the spectrum. You got the 3500K is a red spectrum, and that's going to give you a fall time of year The 10K is like you can produce a whole bunch of UV with a 10K and stress them that way. Anyways, you can definitely do what you're talking about and have a lot of fun with it and change the colors of your plants, the structure, everything.
Move on to another question.
Yeah, but thanks. I never knew the black body lights, so yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Has that answered your question, Nasser?
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
That's great. Thank you. We've got a few more questions yet still in the chat bar. I think we're just going back a little bit to something we moved away from. But will the seed pods mature if taken off plants before they're ready?
No.
Was that a definitive answer?
Terry, do you disagree?
No, I absolutely agree, Russell.
So there we go. There's a definitive answer to that one. Keep them on the plants. Otherwise, you'll end up with problems.
There's also sometimes you'll find that even if you allow the capsule to ripen, if you take the seed and sow it immediately, you may not get brilliant germination. Keep that seed at room temperature for a further 12 months and try again. And you might well get much better germination. And this is the reason why I like to bake the seed on the plants for as long as I can during the summer before I actually harvest the capsules.
Yep. On that note, I took all the lithops seed from last year's harvest and I'm saving it to sow this coming summer. So I'm aging it for a full year because although you will get some germination if you sow it fresh, it'll be a long and staggered germination and you may rot the seed before it actually gets a chance to germinate. So aging your mesem seed is actually a really good idea, especially with lithops for some reason.
Yeah. So though a lot of succulent plant seed, cactus seed, aloaceae seed, you might want to store in the fridge to prolong the period of viability. I never store mesem seed in the fridge. I always store it at room temperature. And the viability lasts for, 10 years probably.
I recently sowed some 15-year-old lithops seed. It was Gracilla delineata that I got at Mesemb Day, local California-based Mesemb gathering. And it germinated like gangbusters. Best germination I ever had on a lithops, 15 years old. It's really amazing.
Okay, can I take another question that's in the chat bar then, which was from Erin? What would you do with a Mesemb seed tray that for more than a month doesn't show any sprouting? Would you leave it more time, dry it and start again next year, or move on?
Good question.
Well,
a seed tray that's been presumably sown seed and after a month there's nothing growing.
I've had some take 2 months.
It's so strange because most mesem seed is going to be up between 3 and 10 days. There's a very rare few mesems that take longer. I would give 30 days for maybe Denteranthus. There are a few things that can take years, but if it's something like a Chirodopsis or a lithops and it hasn't come up in a month, it probably never will. And I've had complete sowing failures like that. I've tried drying out and then rewatering after a few weeks or a few months or even waiting a year. Very, very rarely has that panned out for mesems for me. That has worked with lots of other things, bulbinies, Athonus, pelargoniums. Some things will have long staggered germinations, but it does also go back to whether or not if you've sown fresh seed versus aged seed. I have noticed that I'll get delayed and staggered germination on fresh seed. So it's certainly worth drying it out, waiting a month and watering again. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Russell has said. Something has gone wrong with that sowing. And one of the possible things is, I wonder if it's been kept too hot, because a lot of the winter growing mesems, and even some of the lithops, if you got the temperature up, say 25 to 30 on a continual basis, they might not germinate. So if that is the reason, then dropping the temperature, you might get germination. Otherwise, I got a feeling something may have gone wrong with the compost. The seeds have rotted off. I doubt whether there was anything wrong with the seeds themselves, but almost certainly something went wrong with the sowing.
Do you guys have the Farmer's Almanac in the UK? Are you familiar with this publication?
No.
Oh, it's a very fun little publication that's come out for years and years. And Brian Kimball locally swears by it. And it's a bit of superstition and kind of astrology. And it sort of says, well, you sow your seeds on this day of the month when the moon is in Jupiter and all this other bullshit. But he swears by it and loves it. And there is something to choosing a method or a reason why you do something. And so having a system, basically the Farmer's Almanac presents a system for growing plants. And the system is not really real. It's not about the alignment of the stars, I don't think, but it is a system that kind of provides a structure for doing what you do. And anyway, but Brian would say it's because you didn't read the Farmer's Almanac and sow on the right day of the month.
Yeah, there's certain days for like weaning children and stuff too, and that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See.
Thank you for that. David Lambie, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, David, please?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. So I'm in Bristol in the United Kingdom. It's kind of a general question. So I've been growing lithops for years, and I've always grown them as we've described here as summer growing plants. When I was introduced to the joys of Facebook, I came across a lot of people who take the view that they're winter growing plants, or at least that they have a summer dormant period. And some people link this potentially to high nighttime temperatures during the summer, things we don't suffer with too much in the UK, but maybe in Texas is a bit different. I just wondered if you had a view on, I think Russell said he treated them as summer growers. Do you find there's a dormancy in summer, or do you find in other areas, is this a regional thing, or is it just not right? Or
I have something to say about that for sure. Most of these plants that we call winter or summer are actually spring and fall plants. There's none of our plants are really growing a lot right now because the days are so short. They just don't have enough light to do a lot with it. And in the summer, things can get so harsh that they also have to take a break then. So so you may be a summer growing plant, but you can't risk ever opening your stomata because you'll lose all your water to this hot, dry air, right? And so so it's certainly true if it gets too hot and stays hot at night, the plants will stop growing because they can't breathe. I don't know if that makes what I said just makes sense, but it is definitely true that with a lot of winter growing plants, you'll see a burst of growth in the spring and a burst of growth in the fall, and the mid of winter and summer, you won't see much at all. That's certainly true with, say, Adramyscus. Adramyscus they do the most growing they're going to do in spring and fall. And they grow right alongside of mesembs. So I don't know if that's helpful. But one of the great mysteries to me is that there are lithops that grow in winter rainfall areas. Right on the coast in Namaqualand, you'll get lithops optica, and you get lithops harryi and marmorata and these other things that are in real winter rainfall places, but they are perfectly happy being grown as summer plants with all the rest of lithops. So.
If I can elaborate on what Russell has just said, nearly all succulent plants use the crassulacean acid metabolism. And in that, the plants, and this includes cacti, they keep the stomata shut during the daytime, and they open their stomata at night to take in carbon dioxide and store it in the form of malic acid to produce in photosynthesis on the next day. Now, for the stomata to open at night, there has been a bit of research done on things like ferrocacti in Arizona. And if the temperature is above 18 degrees C at night, the ferrocacti do not open their stomata. So we can use this to make a sort of generalization, really, that if wherever you are, you have got high night temperatures, then almost all succulent plants are going to stop growing. And also, if they're going to stop growing, you've got to ease back on the watering. So we have the paradox that if there's a heat wave, then we probably water our plants less than if the conditions are more equitable.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually a very interesting point, because when we have a heat wave here, I feel the need to cool my plants off, and that's when I'll get out the misting nozzle and get water on the plants, but not in the soil. So that on a very hot day, if I know I'm going to get burning on my plants, I can cool them off and not risk rotting the plants. And we had a few heat waves this past year when I wasn't home, and I got burns on my plants, which I showed you earlier. So.
It even happens under our conditions.
Yeah, thank you. That's kind of matched what my thinking was, because you talked there about cam and the ferrocacti, and that's the stuff like that reported in the cactus primer, presumably.
Yes.
Things. I don't know if I think there must be a lot of variation, because there's certainly plants that people grow in the tropics where I don't think they get that cold at night and grow fantastically, and some things which don't. So there's quite a lot of variability in cam, and I wonder if anybody's done any work any closer to the mesembs and cacti.
It sounds like an area where more research needs to be done.
Yeah, you're not aware of any? Is the
no?
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, David. We are now about to run into issues with hosting, because we need to finish by 10. We've got 9 minutes to go. And I've got one last quick question that I can pick out of the, it's vanished, hang on. It was there a minute ago, sorry, from the chat bar, which was, I can't see the name of the person now, but somebody wants to know what your roof's made of in your greenhouse, Russell. It doesn't seem to be a custom one.
Yeah. There's a horticultural film that comes in huge rolls. It's used for commercial greenhouses, and it's a special plastic with UV inhibitors, and you can buy it from greenhouse supply companies. And it comes in a huge number of widths, 32, 48, 60, 100 feet wide. It comes folded up on a roll. And so it's put on very large commercial greenhouses. And it's fairly expensive. The roof of my greenhouse cost about $250 probably for the roll of plastic, but it's guaranteed for 5 years, and I've had it last 7 or 8. Actually, the first one that I lost was because a tree fell on my greenhouse and broke the plastic, but it can last a really, really long time. If you get standard plastic film from like Home Depot or your local hardware store, that stuff usually breaks down within a year in the UV. So you do need to invest in specialized plastic film for sure.
Okay, thank you for answering that. So I think really we've sort of reached the time where we need to be closing things down. It seems to have been quite successful to have had this question and answer. So it's obviously something to think about, maybe not the next time, but in 6 or 9 months' time, because we do plan to keep these going on a quarterly basis. So hopefully we'll be able to do that again. It's also been nice to have someone with an opinion on one side of the Atlantic to the other who's growing in a completely different type of environment, especially as the audience is here from such a diverse places. I'd like to thank everybody for coming along. We had a very large number of people that were here at one stage. I think it was it over 400 at one stage. So we've done quite well tonight. From lots of different diverse places. I've got some quick thanks I've got to do first of all. I'd like to thank Russell first of all, and his cameraman for giving the talk again tonight. It's been great to see you here. We always try and push the boundary and do something a little bit different. And we had a few issues with bandwidth, but I think it's nice just to be able to experiment and try and do things differently. And it's great to do that. Thanks to Terry for being part of the panel and to answering the questions. Suzanne, for doing everything you do for the MSG and for the vote of thanks. Never mind shaking your head, I can see you. So thank you for all that. John, for San Francisco branch, for hosting it, which gives us that extra time and the extra ability to do other things. And Amanda, Camille and Terry from San Francisco for being our Zoom bomb guardians for the evening to prevent anything nasty from happening. So we look out for this space. The next meeting will be the second Saturday in April, if all goes well, hopefully at the same time as it was tonight. And I'll see everybody then, hopefully. Like, nice for you all to come. I hope everybody will come back and have enjoyed their evening. So thank you.
And I'll just say goodbye to everyone. I badly need a coffee. And it's great to see you again, Russell, after all this time.
Yeah, this is such a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Запись остановлена.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Well, as everybody filters out, I do want to thank all the organizers again. Yeah, that was really wonderful. We can keep, people can chat for a few more minutes if they want to here. But it is nice to keep them wanting more, as they say.
Yeah, keep everybody keen. It seemed to work well enough that I think it would be something that's worth repeating, isn't it? And I've still got questions from chat and from people.
We didn't get to nearly all of them.
We didn't get through most of it, so we've definitely got enough to do something similar again.
Maybe next time we can. I prepared these images. Maybe next time we can do the ID game. I was thinking that we won't have enough questions, so I'll make this ID game. But Stephen sent me his unidentified images from his trip to South Africa, and there's some cool stuff. And it would be really interesting just to put up images and have. I know so many experts were here. There was Lauren Woodley, I think is her name. That was a past president of the CSSA. Al Lias, the editor of Cactus World, was here. I mean, so many really knowledgeable people were here. But I think that one thing that people this is the Mesemb Study Group, and so it's okay to sort of nerd out. So I was thinking that what could be cool was to just show a series of pictures of mesembs and get them to talk about or succulents and say, is this first question, is this a mesem? Why what are you looking for? What does your eyes see that quickly tells you yes or no? And kind of talk through, for some of the newer people, go through that sort of process that people who've been growing for 40 years and gone to habitat have already built up in their head but can't necessarily explain easily. So maybe we can do that next time, though, because I think it would be a really fun exercise as a group if we can kind of engineer it right.
That's great. Thank you.
And wow, 419. That's higher than my than any of my estimates. I was thinking
417. I counted.
417. Yeah, that was the max that I saw too.
418 at one time.
Yeah.
Oh, it got up to 18. Okay. Yeah. I report those numbers that are.
Yeah.
Hi. We got to 433 at one point.
Oh.
What was it?
433.
Wow. I report all the numbers of our events at our Succulent Society at our board meetings. So that's definitely the record for our chat room or our Zoom account that we've ever had, and that is actually right up there with the top numbers for BCSS and CSSA. So that's really impressive. I'm really happy to have worked with you all to put this together, and I know that I think the advertising really made a big difference when you combine all the different ways that we got it out there. So
John, I'm conscious of the time, and I know you've got another commitment. Do you want to close it down at this point then?
I think we'll do it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you. We'll see everybody again shortly. Hopefully 3 months, everybody will be back.
Then go to the BCSS meeting on Friday and the following Tuesday.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to everybody.
And CSSA is on the Saturday.
Yep.